Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Cup Chat with Birding with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. Today is our monthly Beyond Birds Cup Chat. So we're super excited to welcome Dr. NG, one of our climatologists at Texas A&M University. So birds and weather, how is it related? Maureen is an official weather nerd. So we're excited to kind of fulfill her weather nerd fantasies today, as Dr. NG kind of gives us some tips and tricks and things that he knows and shares his knowledge about climate weather.
We got to be careful. I'm not going to designate that I'm an official weather nerd until Dr. Nielsen-Gammon gives us the approval to do that, because I mean he's the real weather expert here today. So if he decides that I get to be classified as a weather nerd, then we'll go with that. But don't give me any official titles, because we've got a true expert here. You're making me feel nervous is all I got to say. But
I thought I got to dictate your nerdiness.
Oh, you get to dictate my nerdiness. Okay, that's fair. Real quick to share with everybody, Dr. Nielsen-Gammon is a Regents professor at Texas A&M in the Department of Atmospheric Sciences and the state climatologist. So before we ask you any other questions, what does a state climatologist get to do? Because I'm assuming that means there's one for every state in the country. And what does that mean? What additional responsibilities do you have in addition to being a professor?
Yeah, pretty much there's one for every state. The program started back in the 1940s when the Weather Service started getting involved in climate stuff. And it was originally National Weather Service employee, one in each state. And then in the early 70s, Weather Service got bored with climate and discontinued the program. But the services being provided by the state climatologists were, for the most part, continued by the individual states through their own initiative. So I do things like monitor the Texas climate, do reports on the state of the climate and extreme weather events. I do a lot of outreach, press interviews, or events like this one. I serve as a liaison with federal government on climate-related issues. And probably most importantly, I do a lot of climate-related research to help people in Texas make the best possible use of weather and climate information.
So could you tell me and change the weather so it's not cold ever? I'm like a cat. It'll only be cold or wet. Can you fix that for us, Dr. NG?
Well, you're talking about the weather nerd official status, and I was on a call yesterday with a planning committee going to do a weather conference in Lubbock at the beginning of April. And I suggested an outdoor event, and someone on the line was concerned about the weather, and I was sitting there trying to think, what weather in Lubbock in April would weather nerds not want to be outside for? So I think that's your definition. If you want to be in Lubbock in April, you're a weather
nerd. Oh my.
That's fair. There's a lot. It's funny, just having those places with variability more so than others. And Lubbock is definitely somewhere that you think of, because it sure has a difference between cold in the winter and hot in the summer, and throw some rain and tornadoes in there for y'all for the spring, and there's all kinds of good things. So
yeah, Texas in particular is more variable than most other places. I grew up in California, Northern California, and there I describe the weather as a function of location rather than a function of time. You could be on the coast and it'd be in the 50s. You can go inland, it'd be 100 degrees. Here you have to wait for the weather to change, but it's guaranteed to do that.
Well,
okay, so I was going to say
it sleeted here yesterday.
Oh, congratulations.
No, that was not a congratulatory moment. The weirdest thing, you talk about the difference and how variable Texas is. I am, so I'm originally from the Dallas-Fort Worth area, moved and lived in Del Rio for about 4 years. And now I'm in Fredericksburg. And I tell you what, the weather in Fredericksburg, everyone makes fun of me because it is so much colder here. I mean, like the weather difference in 3 hours, I don't own enough clothing.
And there's a saying about that, right? Like it's like I don't know, I'm going to mess up where it's from, but like there's no such thing as bad weather, just inadequate clothing. So I think the bottom line is you have to just go shopping. So
darn the luck. Okay,
So I was actually gonna save that question for, I had thought of this as another question for the end, but I'm gonna go ahead and ask it now since we brought it up, is you hear people say in Texas, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes and it'll change. But I grew up in Colorado and we said the same thing. And so I wanted to ask, like, as far as variability, you think of, obviously Texas has a lot of different climates because it's so big, right? Like some of it is that function of location. If you're in Rhode Island, the whole state's climate is going to be less variable just as a function of the size of the place. But is it, I'm sure it's something that y'all study, like what can you say about climate variability, say Austin, San Antonio versus Denver versus Seattle, where you think of it being like really stable and rainy all the time or whatever? Do y'all study ever the, where has the highest climate variability for its location, like for that particular area? Is Texas truly have crazier or more variable climate, not as a state, but like within our places, if that makes sense?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, for within state variability, you want topography. Because Fredericksburg's in the hill country, so it's got different stuff going on, and of course, in the Chisos Basin, you've got other completely different stuff going on. In Colorado, the mountains versus the plains. One thing that tends to surprise people is that Texas's all-time high temperature record is equal to North Dakota's all-time high temperature record. So if you really want variable weather, go inland, and also you want to be at sort of mid latitudes because you get warm air from the south, get cold air from the north. If you're in the tropics, doesn't matter where you are, the weather's going to be pretty close to the same. You might have a wet season and a dry season, but you don't have things that look like winter or summer.
Okay,
So,
that makes sense.
I would go for North Dakota, Montana. Montana, you get the best of both worlds. You can be on the upslope side or downslope side of the mountains, or you can be out in the plains. And there have been occasions up there because you get downslope winds off the mountains where the temperature can change 60, 70 degrees in a few hours.
And I knew that Montana had the record for like the most drastic temperature change, right? In like in a 24-hour period or whatever, is that it goes from really high to really low. But I didn't know that North Dakota had the same record high as we do. But then it makes sense that they would be even more variable because I'm sure their lowest low is way, way lower than our lowest low.
Yeah. And in terms of climate stuff, like from year to year or season to season, the biggest driver of that is El Nino and La Nina. And that tends to affect precipitation in the southern United States one way, and in parts of the northern United States another way. But over on the East Coast, particularly from mid-Atlantic states northward, there's not a big El Nino effect. And so their rainfall tends to be about the same year after year. What they consider to be a major drought would be just a typical dry year in Texas in terms of rainfall variability. So we get stuck with large changes from day to day in the wintertime. July can be pretty boring. And then large changes from year to year because of El Nino.
I would take July heat over this weather any day. It's cold.
Well, so let's back up though a little bit too. I want to pause for a second because we kind of dove right into some of those things, but we're talking about weather and we're talking about climate. So
birds. Wait. Can't forget the birds.
Well, yes. And we're talking, we always try to talk about birds, but for a birder, what are the basics of what you need to know? What climate versus weather? Climate is definitely something that I think a term that people hear way more often now. You hear it a lot more just kind of mainstream than you used to, but can you break down for us climate versus weather? When does weather become climate?
Well, if you wait long enough, weather records become climate records. The simple definition would be that climate is the statistics of the weather. So, you hear about temperature, that's weather. You hear about average temperature, that's climate. Climate's more than just averages, it's also the variability. And it's what happens typically or what happens unusually, being able to characterize it that way. Like knowing that the first freeze typically comes at a certain time of year, and that sort of thing. That's climate information. So yeah, it's just putting, you get enough weather, eventually you have something you can analyze the statistics of, and you got climate.
Got it. Okay.
All right, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so if birders pay attention a lot to the weather to go out, because like me, I'm not going to go out if it's cold or rainy. Some people are more dedicated than I and are going to go out if it's cold and rainy, but at least they will dress better than I. What is the most reliable way to get your weather to make kind of those decisions about what to wear, where to go, when to bird, and some of those things? Is there a most reliable way to get our information?
Well, I mean, a lot of it has become standardized. There's a lot of weather apps out there. I don't use any of them. Basically, I just look at the direct output from the weather forecasting computer models and make my own forecast. But the National Weather Service puts out not just the numerical forecast what's going to happen, but they also include discussions about what they think is going to happen and why. And anytime you can get something that involves a human forecaster, playing the different possibilities out and coming to a conclusion, you can actually get an understanding of whether the forecast is locked in or whether there's a couple of things that might happen. So if you can go to the Weather Service or other sources like essentially broadcast meteorologists, if it's a meteorologist, they can explain the reasoning, then you've got an potential advantage. And
well, I can see that my Apple iPhone weather app has not always been the most reliable.
And of course, the closer you are to the event, the better chance you have of the forecast being correct. We've done better and better with forecast lead times. Right now, even the forecast a week in advance can be useful a lot of the time, but it's still not going to be guaranteed to be correct, of course.
So let me ask you that question a little bit. So you said, a week in advance that can be useful. Why does the weather change that fast? Why is it so? Why is there that level of unpredictability? Why?
Yeah, so and that's like yesterday so Emily, you said you had sleet. We had we had itty bitty hail and it was weird. But when I had looked at my weather the morning before, like that morning, it said a 2% chance of rain. So like how does it decide like it's a 2% chance of rain and then obviously it hailed? What do those percentages really mean when we're like interpreting what we see?
Yeah, well, we've got a lot of questions in that one. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know how nerdy you really want me to be here on this one.
Super nerdy.
Go nerd. Phil Maureen's heart.
So there's a technical term called chaos, which is not from the old Get Smart comedies, but it's the idea that if the weather were to be almost identical from one day to the next around the entire globe, it would only take a couple of weeks for the weather to evolve differently enough that it would look completely different by then. The paradigm for that is a butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil can potentially change whether a tornado strikes Kansas a couple of weeks later. So the short answer is we have chaos. We have weather problems forecasting because of butterflies. We didn't have butterflies that are.
Okay, we probably, we've had butterfly people on here before. I don't know that Stephanie Lopez is going to be super happy to hear you say that. She's going to think.
There are nice butterflies and there are evil butterflies. You can blame the bad weather on the evil butterflies. And the reason that has an effect is because the atmosphere is unstable. The sun is constantly adding heat in the tropics at the ground, and it's like putting a heating pad under a pot of water and boiling it. The heat has to get redistributed somehow. Eventually, too strong a temperature difference, and so like in the summertime, we get thunderstorms because the air at the ground is hot and moist, and the air aloft is cold and dry. That's unstable, and you can't really forecast exactly where a thunderstorm is going to develop. In the wintertime, you've got this big contrast between the tropics and high latitudes, and that's unstable too. And so you get the jet stream developing wiggles and storms forming, and storms develop over the course of a day or two. And so after a few days, you don't know what's going to trigger the next storm where. So those are the main factors that go into it.
So basically it all boils down to hot and cold.
That's right. Yeah, you get energy differences, and then the atmosphere tries to smooth them out a bit, and that's what produces the weather.
That makes sense, because you, from like the physics standpoint, that you've got, everything's always trying to equalize, right? Like you've got that hot moving to cold, moving towards cold to try to get things to stabilize, but you've got continuous input of hot from the sun, and then as it's heating different things, and different things are heating unequally, and everything moves around, and throw some moisture in there, and a lot of chaos.
Yeah, and you hear people say that we're making the climate unstable. Well, we're not. The weather is always sort of on the edge of instability, and it's just going to a different threshold than it was before.
Okay. So when you're looking at, when I look at my forecast, because I think, Emily, this is the definition of real weather nerd, is when you make your own forecasts, right? Like Dr. Nielsen-Gammon is definitely clearly on a different level than I am, because I can't make my own forecast. But when I pull up my app or my, the long-term weather forecast or whatever, and it is, so for today it says 2% chance of rain or 20% chance of rain, which my husband and I joke that in the summer, they always put 20% just to give you false hope. But then when it says 10%, it seems like it actually rains. So how does a forecaster decide, like, what does 10% versus 20% mean on your app?
Well, on the one hand, 10% or 20% chance of rain is saying that under these particular forecasted weather conditions, there's a 10 or 20% chance of rain occurring at a given location. And it's sort of evolved from that to essentially sort of the confidence of a forecaster in rain occurring. So it's gone from statistical to sort of odds and uncertainty sort of thing. In the summertime, it's 20% because you don't know where the thunderstorms are going to. There are going to be thunderstorms in the summertime in various places, more of them on the coast or in the mountains, but you don't know exactly where they'll develop. So that's why we get this relatively useless summertime forecast. And also the weather's not as variable in the summertime on a large scale, so you're stuck with, we know what's going to happen. It's going to be hot. I tell people I can make really good forecasts. My prediction for next July 8th is 95 degrees with 20% chance of rain. You just take a look. It's going to be very close.
We will. I'm going to type that in the comments so we can come back and reference that.
Yeah, and see how close.
Dr. NG's forecast for July 8th, 2022 or 2023.
2020, it will be 2023.
2023.
When will it be 2023?
It will be
in a year and
95 with 20% chance of rain.
Okay, and so I want to bring up, so we talked then, that's kind of like we're kind of talking about both. We're kind of talking about like when I look on my app today and see whatever it says the chance of rain is. But then I also wanted to, this is a map. I'm going to share my screen here in a second if I can find the one that I'm thinking of, not the drought outlook. I want the I want the outlook, but I'm trying to find the right one. But one of the things that we like to talk to landowners about sometimes is, I found it, is what, kind of, like you said, kind of that looking ahead and that longer term scale, knowing that there's some unpredictability there. But if we look at, for example, okay, here, I'm going to share my screen so that everybody knows what I'm talking about. This is a map. Oftentimes, if I'm giving a program about something having to do with wildlife that may be impacted with weather, I will pull up one of these maps. And this is, we've got everybody on here right now. This is like the seasonal temperature outlook for the whole next year. But if you look at any one of these and you look at Texas, you're like, oh man, Texas is, oh, perfect. There we go. Zooming in. Texas is, you know, in that orange. That means it's going to be hotter over the next month. But then when you read what that key says, it says this is the percent chance. So that looks like there's a 50% chance that Texas temperatures will be above normal. So does that mean there's a 50% chance that Texas temperatures won't be above normal? Is that correct?
You know, as long as the Climate Prediction Center produces forecast products like this, there will be a need for state climatologists to explain what they really mean.
Job security. Oh my gosh.
We love job security. That's perfect.
So what they do is they look at like the past 3 decades, 1991 to 2020, and for the weather in fairly large areas, they got Texas divided into 9 areas, for example. They look at you got 30 years worth of average temperatures per given season. They divide it into thirds. You got the 10 hottest, the 10 middle, the 10 coldest, basically. And what they do is they're predicting the odds of it being in either the hottest third or the lowest third of the historical temperatures. So in this case, for most of Texas, we're in the 50 to 60% chance. That's saying there's a 50 to 60% chance of temperatures falling into the upper third of recent history. Meanwhile, there's a 1 in 3 chance of it being in the middle third, and then whatever's left over is the cooler third, which, let's see if I've done my math right, is anywhere from 7 to 17% chance. So yeah, unfortunately, it's doesn't actually mean above normal. It means what I call substantially above normal. To do just translate into plain English, you have to actually do some complicated math. So
I think what he just said was you need to quit using that in your presentations. In the short version, in a nice way.
Well, it means I learned.
Well, the colors are pretty.
This is what I ask. This is why I ask, is because I want to know if I'm understanding this right. So if you're up in North Dakota for January with that equal chance, you're saying that it's a 1/3 chance that you're going to fall into each of those categories. So 1/3 chance of being above, 1/3 middle, 1/3 lowest.
That's right.
It's kind of like, that kind of sounds like, sometimes when agents do their reports and we just kind of grab things out of thin air and go, maybe this is what happens.
Well, I could explain this show this to a weather nerd if I wanted to. Let me bring up my own website here. Give me about a minute while we talk about something or something else. But you can actually find what it really means if you know exactly where to look.
Oh, okay. See, this will satisfy my nerdiness when I'm like, I want to see exactly what this means. But I guess the reason we talk about stuff like this at programs is just kind of to remind people, and this will tie into another question, but I'll let you share your website, is just to remind people that there are kind of these long-term changes. So, when you're thinking from most of our viewers are birders and may not necessarily be landowners, but when I'm working with landowners, and you're thinking about being prepared for drought, that's something you don't wait until you're in a drought to prepare for drought. And so I guess that's kind of why I bring those things up, is to remind people, hey, like, it might be hot and dry for the next few months. Let's, think now about what your management actions need to be. Oh, okay. Well, see, such good maps. I'm so excited.
So yeah, there's a Climate Prediction Center, and you can find outlooks for different lengths of time going forward. And the 3-month outlook is what we're looking at. The outlook for the temperature, the outlook for temperature for the next 3 months is and precipitation are on there. And you also can dig in a bit. I talked about it's useful to understand what the scientists are thinking. You can find discussions of why they think this is going to happen across the United States, if you really want to dig into it. But then if you're a super nerd you can go to the probability of exceedance category. And this is the non-pretty version of it with the magnitude of the temperature changes thrown in. So this is 1 degree warmer in degrees Fahrenheit than average. So that's what the median forecast is. And if you're really serious about it, you can click on a particular climate division and get this, which is a graph showing a particular probability. So 50% chance of temperature averaging 51 degrees during the next 3 months is like the climatological average. The forecast is out here at about 52.3 degrees. If you want to look at what's the 10% chance, maybe a few degrees warmer, not much than that. And lots of explanation, and I've just ruined your entire day because you're going to go looking at this and trying to figure it all out now. So yeah, just wanted to share that.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I have big reports due on, well, Saturday technically, but I can't get distracted by climate. I'm going to set that aside in my brain for later when my reports are done. Maybe that's what I'll do to celebrate turning in my reports, is I'll go poke around on the climate site.
Oh my goodness.
How's that for nerdiness, Em?
Well, I just kind of thought it was funny that the forecaster is going to go a little bit above average. Why wouldn't they give you the Debbie Downer moment and tell you it's going to be cooler? That way you're not expecting warmer. And so I don't know. I guess I would like my weather forecaster to lie to me just a smidge and go lower. So when it's nicer outside, it's a good thing. Versus when it's supposed to be warm yesterday and it decides to sleet.
That's right. When they tell you what they think is actually going to happen, you'll be disappointed half the time. If you get the worst case scenario, you'll always be pleasantly surprised.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So, and I know we got to wrap up soon, but one more question that maybe will make Emily happy is this: a month from now, a year ago, so last February, Emily was very, 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 very cold. Does she?
I was standing in 12 inches of snow in Del Rio. Let me tell you how unhappy I was.
Oh, it was so cold in Del Rio that we spent some considerable time 2 or 3 weeks later trying to figure out what actually happened, because the official weather station was knocked out for several days.
Let me tell you, there was 12 inches of snow and all my water lines broke. And so we had to shear sheep inside my office to get ready to leave for San Antonio. So that's what happened. I can give you, if you need more details, just have them call Dr. NG. I'll fill in the blanks for them.
Wait a minute. Were you shearing sheep because you operate a ranch, or because you left all your winter coats someplace else?
Well, we didn't have any winter coats. We were shearing sheep because the storm came right in the middle of the San Antonio Stock Show. And so they still hosted the show, but the day we left to go, the day we had to leave was the day that we got the 12 inches of snow in Del Rio. I mean, and literally up to my knees when I was leaving to go, I was walking in my house and I promise you it was at least mid-calf. I mean, it was crazy. So
that was the largest snowstorm in Del Rio history.
I believe it.
So making your predictions, you made your prediction for July of 2023. Can you make your prediction for February? Are we going to get another big freeze and snowstorm this year?
Well, since the one that happened in February is so unusual, I will say no, we won't, and I'll probably be right. On the other hand, the at least the forecasts tend to be good for 7 or 8 days, as I mentioned. The model forecast for 10 or 12 days out last time I looked actually had a decent chance of a snowstorm across Texas. So that'll be about toward the end of next week. So keep your eyes open for how the forecasts develop on that one. A lot can change because of that. We don't know what all the butterflies are doing, but it's certainly a possibility.
Well, and it's just crazy. And we laugh in stock show season. I mean, like it is. So stock show season, Dr. NG is like now till the end of March. And so like you can have the Fort Worth Stock Show, which ranges from the end of January to the end of February, or to the beginning of January. I don't know. It's a couple weeks right here. And we will have gorgeous days, like 70 degrees, sit outside, it's warm, everybody comes to the fair, and then it can be freezing. And it's just so bizarro how, I mean, I had to sleep in an office chair once at the stock show because we couldn't get home because of the ice. I mean, like, and then the next day it's beautiful. And it blows my mind. And if we could just keep stock show season warm and nice outside, it'd be lovely.
Yeah, I can't do it.
Now, okay, I have one more question and then I promise we'll wrap up. A lot of people use farmer almanacs. Who develops those? And is there any truth, or would you put any stock in a farmer's almanac?
Yeah, the people who publish it develop it. They keep their methods secret. It's sort of like astrology in that they try to be vague enough that what actually happens will line up with what they say more often than not. But no, I regard it as one of those things that has the fine print on the bottom for entertainment purposes only.
Okay, well,
That's funny because this year I had some friends say the Farmer's Almanac says it's going to be cold and wet this winter. And I said, okay, but y'all, last year you told me that the Farmer's Almanac said it was going to be warm and dry, and then it froze. So that's a really good question because I do know a lot of people that look at those, but I think they're developed well enough in advance. I guess that's one of the things that's cool to me about like the map that you showed with the climate prediction and why they're predicting that is those are changing, right? Like when y'all get new information, you update the predictions. And so it's like this constant reevaluation of those weather models as opposed to a Farmer's Almanac being published well in advance. And I mean, something could happen. There's so much we could talk about, but like a volcano erupts and that can affect, if you have a huge volcanic eruption, it can affect like the whole world's climate, right? And that's obviously not going to be predicted in the Farmer's Almanac that was published a year ago. And I know that's not something like that's an extreme example, but things happen that can affect the weather on the whole globe that we weren't really expecting to have those things happen, right?
Yeah, you really can only predict El Nino and La Nina 5 or 6 months in advance, and that's our main tool for seasonal forecasting, and that just tells us what will tend to happen. Last winter would have been warmer than normal. It wasn't for about a week and a half there in the middle of February.
Okay.
So yeah,
I went extreme there with volcanoes. El Nino, La Nina is a lot better example.
Yeah, the more up to date your source, the least the better chance it has of being correct.
okay. So really basically all you've, Dr. NG, I hate to say this, but the only hope you've given us is that it's going to be hot and it's going to be cold and it's going to change and it can change often. And we really aren't going to know well in advance that it's going to change. Is that an accurate summary of today's Cup Chat?
You do like pessimistic forecasts, don't you?
I do. I do.
Actually, I'm going to go back to the thing that Dr. Nielsen-Gammon said about stability across the globe. And I think the bottom line is you need to live in the tropics because that's like a nice, or coastal, like Southern California, stable climate, I think is what you're looking for if you want climate stability.
If you'd like to know what's going to happen.
I will move to the coast of California when I can afford it.
No,
I'm in on the good weather.
Just wait for the next big earthquake. Property prices will go way down.
Well, and I would summarize one of my favorite quotes that I like to use and remind myself when we're doing just, wildlife, whenever we're doing analyses is all models are wrong, but some are useful. I think it was George Box had quoted that, is that we're doing the best we can to model, and you're modeling farther out with a lot of uncertainty, but it's useful to look at, but you have to know that it's just a model and it's going to be wrong. And we don't know the weather until it's happening.
That works for me.
That's my wrap up. Okay.
All right.
Dr. Nielsen-Gammon, any final remarks that you would like to make?
Yes, share your weather nerd statement of the day?
Nope, I don't have anything.
Okay. I think with your prediction for next July 8th, I think that was all we needed.
Yes.
So we'll check back on that. And I guess, was that for this July 8th or next July 8th? Or doesn't matter? We
I
could
was
do
talking
both.
about the July 8th coming up, but it doesn't really
Okay.
matter a whole
Doesn't
lot.
really matter. Okay. So
That's the beauty of climate forecast. I can tell you what it's going to be 100 years from now, and nobody will be around to say that I was right or wrong.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We did, Maureen, remember, went off script last week and had a giveaway. And so, Dr. Gammon, would you pick a number between 1 and 25 for me?
24.
24. Oh,
My birthday, my wife's birthday.
Hey,
all right.
That's good.
So Miss Allen from Brazos County is our winner. So you will get free access to our Whooping Crane virtual seminar that's coming up in March. So we're excited. And if you have any questions, we'll message you about how to get all that information and get registered for free. So thank you so much, Dr. NG, for joining us. I promise I will have better hope about the weather. I just hate being cold. And I'm just always cold. There's just nothing. Someone sent me a shirt that I needed. Yes, I'm still cold. Me 24/7. So it just doesn't get any, there's just no hope. I mean, like I can sit in a restaurant and need a parka because the wind is slightly blowing on me from the air conditioner. So I'm not the best to chit chat about the weather. So
in other words, next time we have Dr. Nielsen-Gammon come on, we'll make sure it's in July and you can sit outside and be happy.
Yes, that would put me in a much better weather talking mood. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We hope you have a wonderful Wednesday and we'll see you next Wednesday. Oh, who's our guest next Wednesday? Before you turn us off.
We're going to talk about geese ID. Identifying different species of geese. So
I will not be here. Y'all have fun with that.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.